The studio lights burned bright, casting a harsh glow over the sleek news desk as the cameras rolled and millions of viewers locked their eyes on the screen. This was no ordinary debate. This was a moment that would be dissected, replayed, and talked about long after the broadcast ended. Karoline Leavitt sat across from Ilhan Omar, poised and unshaken, her expression betraying nothing. She was ready not just to engage, but to make an impact. The air inside the studio was thick with anticipation, as though everyone present could sense that something monumental was about to unfold. From a very first exchange, it was obvious this wasn't going to be a routine debate filled with empty political rhetoric. Omar, exuding confidence, leaned in with a dismissive smirk, assuming control of the conversation as she had done so many times before. She was used to steering discussions, setting the tone, dictating the pace. But this time, she wasn't facing just another opponent. She was facing Karoline Leavitt, someone who didn't just come prepared but had mastered every angle of the discussion. The viewers could see it. Even the moderators, who had seen countless heated debates before, could feel it. Something different was happening here. Then it happened. A direct challenge, unfiltered, undeniable, and impossible to ignore. Leavitt didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words were sharp, precise, and devastatingly effective. It wasn't an attack. It was a surgical strike. A statement so pointed and irrefutable that the very air in the studio seemed to change. Omar, taken aback, blinked, just for a second, just long enough for the tension to rise. The audience held their breath, waiting for a response, waiting for something to break the weight of the moment. But it never came, not in the way anyone expected. Since when does the truth need your permission? Leavitt's voice rang clear, carrying through the room like a bell tolling in the dead of night. The energy shifted. People watching live leaned in closer. The silence that followed wasn't just a pause. It was a recognition, a realization that something powerful had just been said. Omar's usual composure faltered for a fraction of a second, but that fraction was enough. The atmosphere had changed. The conversation was no longer hers to control. The impact was immediate. Online, clips of the exchange began circulating before the debate had even ended. Social media lit up with reactions, some calling it a defining moment, others struggling to explain how a simple sentence had completely turned the discussion upside down. This wasn't just another heated debate. It was a clash of perspectives, a moment of undeniable clarity, and a lesson in how preparation, confidence, and unshakable conviction could cut through even the most rehearsed narratives. And yet, this was just the beginning. What happened next sent shockwaves across every media platform, igniting conversations that no one saw coming. If you think this moment was intense, just wait until you see how it all unfolded. Stick around for the full story, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you never miss another game-changing moment. As the debate intensified, it became clear that this was not just another political discussion. It was a full-scale ideological showdown. Karoline Leavitt wasn't just here to challenge Ilhan Omar's talking points. She was here to dismantle them with precision, fact by fact, argument by argument. And Omar? She quickly realized that she was up against more than just a prepared opponent. She was up against someone who wasn't afraid to call out inconsistencies, someone who didn't back down when faced with dismissive remarks or rhetorical deflections. Omar attempted to steer the conversation, shifting from one issue to another, deploying familiar strategies, dodging direct questions, redirecting blame, and framing counterarguments as misguided. It was a playbook that had worked before, but not this time. Leavitt anticipated each move before it was even made. She wasn't playing defense. She was setting the pace. Every time Omar tried to pivot, Leavitt pulled her right back in. "Let's stay on topic," she said firmly after one of Omar's attempts to sidestep a direct question. "Answer the question. The American people deserve a straight answer." That was when the tension in the room became almost tangible. The studio audience could feel it. The moderators exchanged quick glances, sensing that this was no longer just a back-and-forth exchange, but a defining moment in the discussion. Every time Omar hesitated or struggled to redirect the argument, it was an opportunity for Leavitt to drive the conversation forward. Omar, visibly frustrated, leaned forward, attempting to regain control. She raised her voice slightly, emphasizing her points with the kind of authority that had, in the past, silenced opposition. But Leavitt didn't flinch. Instead, she let Omar speak, waiting, listening, calculating. Then, in a single, cutting response, she unraveled the argument in a way that left even the most seasoned political analyst stunned. You talk about fairness, but where's the fairness when you dismiss the very concerns of the people who elected you? Leavitt countered, her voice steady, her words deliberate. Accountability isn't selective. You don't get to ignore reality just because it's inconvenient. A murmur rippled through the audience. It was clear that Leavitt's words had struck a chord, not just with those watching the room, but also with viewers at home. Across social media, reactions exploded in real time. Hashtags began trending. Clips were uploaded within minutes, and political commentators weighed in with their analysis. The moment had already transcended the debate stage and was making its way into headlines. Omar hesitated, just for a second, and that was all Leavitt needed. The debate had shifted, the momentum had changed, and for the first time, Omar wasn't leading the conversation. She was reacting to it. Her usual strategies were ineffective, and she found herself forced onto the defensive. She attempted to counter with an emotional appeal, but Leavitt was relentless. Each response was measured, factual, and delivered with unwavering confidence. Meanwhile, the reaction online was immediate. Clips from the debate were already spreading across social media. Comment sections flooded with responses, some in shock, others celebrating what they called a masterclass in debate. News outlets scrambled to cover the moment, headlines forming before the segment had even ended. Political analysts on both sides of the spectrum were left dissecting every exchange, acknowledging that this was more than just another heated discussion. It was a pivotal moment in the ongoing political discourse. But the real challenge was still ahead. Leavitt had won this exchange, but the debate wasn't over. Omar, though momentarily shaken, wasn't about to concede. She was known for her resilience, and she was about to pull out every strategy she had left. The tension in the room was electric, every second carrying the weight of a battle for ideological dominance. The stakes had never been higher, and what happened next would cement this debate as one of the most talked-about confrontations in recent memory. Stay tuned, because the next move changed everything. The energy in the studio was electric. Every person in the room could feel it. This wasn't just another political debate. This was a defining moment. Karoline Leavitt had pushed Ilhan Omar into a corner, systematically dismantling her arguments with sharp, well-researched rebuttals. But now, it was time for the moment that would define the entire exchange, the moment when the entire debate would pivot in one direction, and one voice would rise above the other. Omar, recognizing that she was losing ground, decided to take a bold approach. She leaned in, her tone shifting from defensive to aggressive. "You don't understand the challenges people face," she stated, her voice carrying the weight of her convictions. "You speak in statistics, but you don't speak for the people who are truly struggling." It was an attempt to reclaim the momentum, to paint Leavitt as disconnected, uninformed, and out of touch with the real struggles of everyday Americans. A classic tactic. Appeal to emotion when facts weren't enough. But Leavitt didn't waver. She didn't hesitate. Instead, she did something no one expected. She paused. For a brief second, she let Omar's words settle. Then, with calm precision, she responded. "Congresswoman," Leavitt said, her voice steady and unwavering, "I come from a working-class family. I know what struggle looks like. not from a policy briefing, but from lived experience. And that's exactly why I refuse to let career politicians like you use compassion as a shield for bad policies. The truth is, real change doesn't come from rhetoric. It comes from results. And if your policies worked, we wouldn't still be having this conversation. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in the debate, Omar didn't have an immediate response. She blinked, taken aback, not by anger, not by hostility, but by the sheer force of undeniable logic. The audience could sense it. Viewers at home could feel it. Leavitt had just flipped the entire conversation. And then she went in for the final blow. "You stand here and tell the American people that you fight for them," Leavitt continued, her tone sharpening. "But how do you fight for people when you ignore the consequences of your own decisions? How do you claim to champion opportunity while supporting policies that keep communities dependent instead of empowered? The American people aren't looking for more speeches, more promises, or more excuses. They're looking for real solutions, and you haven't delivered." A stunned murmur rippled through the audience. Even the moderator, who had been carefully balancing neutrality, raised an eyebrow at the sheer force of Leavitt's argument. This wasn't just a strong response. It was a turning point. Omar, visibly rattled, tried to regain her footing. "That's not," she started, but Leavitt was already pressing forward. "No, Congresswoman, this is exactly the problem," she said. "You want to control the narrative, but facts don't bend to political convenience. And the fact is, your policies have failed, and the American people know it." A single moment, a single sentence, and the entire debate shifted. Online, the reaction was instant. Clips of the exchange spread like wildfire across social media. Commentators rushed to break down the moment, some calling it a political knockout, others labeling it a devastating takedown. The hashtag Leavitt Destroys Omar began trending within minutes, as political figures, media analysts, and everyday Americans weighed on what they had just witnessed. Omar, for all her years of experience in high-profile debates, had been caught off guard. She had underestimated Leavitt's ability to not just counter her arguments, but to expose the weaknesses in them with undeniable clarity. This was more than just a debate victory. This was a moment that would be replayed, analyzed, and remembered as the day Karoline Leavitt changed the game. And the debate wasn't even over yet. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this intense debate, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. The moment was still settling in. Karoline Leavitt had just delivered a masterful takedown, and the weight of her words lingered in the air. But this was no time for celebration, because in politics, the fight never ends with just one decisive moment. Ilhan Omar, still visibly shaken, took a deep breath and leaned forward. She wasn't about to let this be the final word. She had experience, she had influence, and she had built a career on handling tough debates. With cameras rolling and millions watching, she couldn't afford to walk away looking defeated. She adjusted her microphone slightly, gathering her composure before delivering what she hoped would be a counterstrike strong enough to shift the momentum. "Miss Leavitt," Omar started, her voice measured but tense, "you speak about real solutions, but what you fail to acknowledge is the complexity of these issues. Governing isn't about delivering sound bites. It's about understanding the full scope of challenges and working through them with nuance and expertise." Her tone was steady, her words deliberate, aimed at positioning herself as the voice of reason rather than the one losing ground. It was a calculated response. She was trying to pivot, to regain control by painting Leavitt as overly simplistic, as someone who could argue well but lacked the depth to truly lead. The move was strategic. By shifting the conversation away from the direct confrontation and toward the broader challenges of governance, Omar sought to reinforce the idea that experience mattered more than a strong debate presence. But Leavitt saw through it instantly. Nuance and expertise? Leavitt echoed, tilting her head slightly, as if genuinely puzzled by the attempt to complicate the conversation. Congresswoman, let's be clear, real leadership isn't about making things sound complicated. It's about making things work. And if after all these years, the only thing you can offer is more talk about how complex things are, then maybe it's time we put someone in office who actually gets things done. The response was swift, cutting, and direct. It wasn't just about refuting Omar's point. It was about redefining the very argument itself. While Omar positioned herself as the experienced stateswoman, Leavitt was framing herself as a pragmatic, no-nonsense leader that people had been waiting for. The audience erupted into murmurs. Some were nodding in agreement, others whispering among themselves, processing what had just been said. Even the moderator seemed momentarily caught off guard. This wasn't just a battle of policies. It was a battle of perception. And right now, Leavitt was commanding the room. She sat poised, her expression unwavering, while Omar seemed to be recalibrating her next move, perhaps realizing that this wasn't a discussion she could steer back into safe territory. But then, the stakes were raised even higher. Outside of the studio, the debate was no longer confined to the room. On social media, clips of the exchange were spreading like wildfire. News outlets were scrambling to cover the moment in real time, each trying to frame the narrative in their own way. Was this a defining moment in political discourse? A passing viral sensation? Or something even bigger? And then, something unexpected happened. A well-known political figure chimed in with a post that sent shockwaves through the discussion. Finally, someone who isn't afraid to speak the truth. America needs more leaders like Karoline Leavitt. #Leadership Matters. The post came from a prominent figure, a senator, a media mogul, a former president. Someone whose words carried weight, whose endorsement alone could reshape the political landscape. Omar's team noticed it immediately, and they knew what it meant. This wasn't just an exchange between two political figures. It had now transcended into something far greater. A single debate had become a defining moment, one that was making headlines beyond the usual political circles. Leavitt wasn't just winning the debate. She was making waves far beyond the studio. Sensing the shift, Omar's tone hardened. "It's easy to criticize," she said, "but actually governing takes real work. If you think you have all the answers, maybe you should try stepping into the arena yourself." Leavitt smiled. She had been waiting for this moment, knowing that Omar's frustration would eventually lead her to say something that could be turned into an opportunity. "Maybe I will," she said, her voice even, her confidence unshaken. And just like that, the entire conversation changed. This wasn't just a debate anymore. This was the beginning of something much bigger. The moment had grown beyond words exchanged in a TV studio. It was now a symbol of the growing shift in political influence, a sign that a new voice was rising, and those in power had no choice but to take notice. The debate was over, but the impact was only beginning. The moment between Karoline Leavitt and Ilhan Omar had ignited something far beyond the walls of the studio. Clips of their exchange had gone viral, shared across news platforms, political forums, and social media feeds worldwide. People weren't just talking about the debate. They were debating it themselves, choosing sides, dissecting every word, and analyzing what it meant for the future of political discourse. For Leavitt, this was more than just a successful debate performance. It was a defining moment. In a political climate where people were hungry for authenticity, for leaders who spoke plainly and with conviction, she had delivered exactly that. But beyond the headlines, beyond the instant recognition, something deeper was happening. Her inbox was flooded with messages, supporters encouraging her, skeptics reconsidering their stance, and even political insiders acknowledging that she was a rising force to be reckoned with. Meanwhile, Omar and her team were doing damage control. While she had held her ground, it was clear that she had underestimated her opponent. What had started as another routine debate had transformed into a cultural moment that could not be ignored. Analysts on cable news debated whether this was a shift in political momentum. Commentators on both sides of the aisle weighed in, some praising Leavitt for her fearless stance, others criticizing her approach. But regardless of opinion, one thing was undeniable. People were talking, and that meant the conversation was far from over. The impact of the debate wasn't limited to just the digital sphere. Within days, Leavitt was invited onto major news networks, interviewed by high-profile anchors who wanted to hear more. Political donors took notice. Party strategists began discussing her potential beyond just media appearances. Was she simply a fresh voice in the movement, or was she laying the groundwork for something much larger? And then came the moment that changed everything. At a political rally shortly after the debate, thousands of supporters gathered, far more than anyone had anticipated. The energy in the air was electric, the crowd chanting her name as she stepped onto the stage. The speech she delivered that night wasn't just about politics. It was about leadership, about standing up for beliefs even when facing opposition, about refusing to back down in the face of political pressure. It was a speech that didn't just respond to the debate, but transcended it, setting the tone for what was to come. For years, political debates had followed a familiar script: rehearsed answers, carefully worded statements, cautious positioning. But this time, something different had happened. This wasn't just another exchange between politicians. This was a moment where the power of a single voice had broken through the noise, proving that genuine conviction could still shake the system. The debate that started as just another televised event had now become something else entirely, a turning point in a larger movement, a symbol of the political shift happening in real time. And as Karoline Leavitt stepped off that stage, walking past a roaring crowd, past the flashing cameras, past the headlines being written in real time, she knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end of the conversation. It was only the beginning. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. More incredible moments like this are coming soon. The moment had passed, but the conversation was far from over. What happened on that debate stage wasn't just about one argument, one viral clip, or one political exchange. It was about a larger movement, a shift in the way people engage with ideas and leadership. Karoline Leavitt had made her mark, and whether people agreed with her or not, they couldn't ignore the impact she had left behind. This wasn't just about politics. It was about standing up for your beliefs, about speaking with conviction, and about refusing to be silenced in a world that often discourages bold voices. It was about the power of real debate, the importance of discourse, and the undeniable influence of those who refuse to back down. And now, the question isn't just about what happened in that moment. It's about what happens next. How will this exchange shape future debates? Will more politicians take a stand with the same confidence and clarity? And more importantly, what do you think? Drop a comment below. Do you think Karoline Leavitt handled this debate the right way? What would you have said in her position? Let's keep this conversation going. If you haven't already, hit that like button to support independent discussions like this. And don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on more powerful moments like this one. This was just one debate, but in a world where every voice matters, every moment like this counts. So stay informed, stay engaged, and most importantly, stay ready for the next big moment that changes everything. See you in the next story.